lot of people have asked me how I go about practicing. I've often been asked how I maintain a practice schedule and how I maintain my playing so that I'm playing at the highest level possible. This made me think back to a time in my life when I was probably at the peak of my practicing on the guitar. I would be practicing from 6 to 8 hours a day, sometimes even more. I started taking practicing really seriously when I was about 17, and I continued the pace of practicing 6 to 8 hours a day until I was about 23 years old. I still practice a lot now, but I approach it a little bit differently these days. We'll get into that later. Make sure to hit subscribe down below and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of my new videos. Also, make sure to head to my website where you'll be able to pick up my online courses, bundle packages, transcriptions, and of course, my music. And let me know if you have any questions or comments about practicing. A common mistake that I see a lot of people making is putting the emphasis on the amount of hours rather than focusing on the inherent quality of the practice time itself. Ultimately, you'd be far better off methodically working through just one concept in 1 hour instead of sitting there for 8 hours with no structure. The amount of hours is not what we're aiming for. However, if you establish a list of 2 or more important concepts that you're trying to practice in a given day, you'll discover that if you're practicing these concepts thoroughly, there's a good chance that it'll take many hours. Rather than being some kind of Herculean display of endurance, the volume of hours that you practice should be born out of necessity, simply because it takes a long time to be able to absorb and digest new musical ideas. Before we go any further in this video, I can't really give you personal advice on how much you should be practicing, but I would like to share with you some of my journey practicing on guitar. I really started thinking about what were probably my peak years of practicing on the guitar when I listened back to a recording the other day of me playing in a trio setting 10 years ago now. I was 22. This little trio recording was recorded in Boston, where I had recently relocated to from Australia at the time. I don't usually delve into old, unreleased recordings of mine, but today we're going to listen back on this one together. It's a solo where I'm improvising over a familiar set of chord changes involving 3 tonal centers. Not necessarily my favorite thing to do to share old, unreleased recordings from 10 years ago that never saw the light of day, but since we're talking about practice, I think it's interesting to go back and listen to this playing from a time when I wasn't really doing much else other than practicing, and hearing what I'm searching for in the playing. And most importantly, hearing myself working out ideas in the moment while playing with people, because ultimately, playing with people is where it really counts. At the time that I made that recording, I was utilizing the same type of practice schedule format that I had utilized for about 5 years at that point. The general idea was to focus on developing 3 or 4 concepts that I felt needed work in my playing, and to do that every day. I'd spend 2 hours working on a concept, take a break, spend another 2 hours working on another concept, take a break, and so on. For me, dividing my practice up into sections and taking breaks has always been really important, both cognitively and physically. Also, before I moved to Boston, I worked most of the week teaching guitar in a local guitar store, and I also attended university, so breaks were necessary because I had a lot of commitments. But to give you a clearer example, I'd typically start my practice day with, let's say, arpeggios for an hour, followed up by 2 hours of voice leading practice through a set of chord changes. Of course, I'd have to factor in some breaks throughout all of this. I'd then resume for another 2 hours, playing through and analyzing a transcription. And perhaps I'd finish it all off by spending an additional hour doing some sight reading practice. Of course, the topics would vary depending on what I felt I needed to work on, but that's a pretty accurate example of a day in the life of me practicing at that time. I usually found myself practicing 6 to 8 hours a day out of necessity, just to get through everything that I felt needed work. I kept this up till I was about 23, which is when I found myself in New York. All of a sudden, I found that I was extremely busy. I was lucky to be working right off the bat, but it meant that I had to rearrange the way that I practiced. All of a sudden, I was getting called for a wide variety of gigs. It necessitated me sitting down and learning music, being there for call times to make the gig, and so on and so forth. So it meant that I had less time to practice the concepts that I wanted to work on. But ultimately, why are we practicing? To play music. So it seemed like a fair trade-off to me to rearrange my practice time in order to get the opportunity to play with, well, some of the best musicians in the world. And ultimately, it's that balance of well-structured practice with the real-world experience of playing with people that helps you crystallize the concepts that you've been working on. Playing with great musicians pretty much every day really helped develop my playing. And it was around this time that I really started to feel okay about my playing as well. Practicing many hours a day for what was about a 5 or 6 year period of my life was really important for my development as a musician. Some of my mentors would say to me when I was younger, practice as much as you can when you're young because you won't have as much time when you're older. And I think that this is partially true. But as I've gotten a little bit older, I've worked out that with a bit of creative scheduling, you can still get a lot done. Let me know if you have any questions, or let me know if you have any stories that you'd like to share about your practicing journey. Drop a comment down below. It'd be great if you could support my channel by hitting subscribe down below. Click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of my new music or new lesson videos. And make sure to head to my website down below for my online courses, bundle packages, transcriptions, and of course, my music. I'll see you next time.